April 1945, France. About 20 German women were jolting along in the back of an American truck through the Normandy countryside of France. All had been captured in the chaos of Germany over the past few weeks. Among them was Clara Huber, a 22-year-old nurse. Her uniform still bore the blood and dirt stains she had acquired at a frontline hospital. She looked around. The other women, radio operators, clerks, a few young assistants, wore the same look of fear and exhaustion. Propaganda had told them that torture and starvation awaited them in Allied prisoner of war camps. Finally, they stopped in front of a camp surrounded by barbed wire, called Camp Phoenix. When they saw the watchtowers and armed guards, Clara felt a wave of fear wash over her. Upon entering, instead of the filth and disorder they had expected, they found neatly arranged wooden barracks and a clean, dusty parade ground. During the camp admission process, Clara and the others were astonished to receive a clean towel, a bar of soap, and even a new toothbrush. These small personal items felt like an almost for luxury after months of war conditions that had stripped them of their humanity. The American officer who greeted them, Captain Jack Miller, spoke in broken but understandable German. "We don't hate you here. You are soldiers. You did your duty. The war is over for you. As long as you obey the rules, the Geneva Conventions will apply to you." The women were silently led to the barracks assigned to them. Clara pointed to a bunk with clean sheets and blankets. For the first time in 6 months, she would sleep in a real bed. The real shock came when they went to the mess hall for dinner. On the tables were tinned meat, mashed potatoes, carrots, and even a piece of bread. It was a feast that even civilians in Germany could not have imagined. For a moment, they wondered if it was poisoned. A young radio operator at the next table, Annalisa, whispered, "Clara, what is this? Why are they treating us like this?" Clara looked at her plate. "I don't know," she replied. "Maybe everything we expected was a lie." That first night, there was silence in their barracks. But this was not the silence of fear, but the silence of astonishment in the face of unexpected humanity. Clara, under the blanket, fell into her first uninterrupted sleep, just because it was warm and clean. The first morning at Camp Phoenix began not with the sound of a siren, but with the faint drumbeat coming from the mess hall door. Clara and the others, still reeling from the shock of the clean sheets, joined the breakfast queue. In line were oatmeal, jam, and real coffee. This beverage, now only a legend in Germany, caused a stir among the women. "Kaffee, wirklich Kaffee." Captain Jack Miller stood in a corner of the mess hall, watching them. His eyes lingered on Clara Huber, the young nurse who had reportedly been captured while treating a wounded soldier. Her file stated, "Professional and humane demeanor, potentially cooperative." After breakfast, the women gathered in the parade ground. Miller explained the camp rules through his interpreter: daily roll call, cleaning duties, permission to write letters. His words were stern, but his tone neutral. Then he made an unexpected addition. "For those who wish, there will be an opportunity to provide basic medical assistance and nursing duties in the camp's small infirmary. In addition, German books are available in our library." Clara's heart quickened. Nursing, it wasn't just a profession. It was part of her identity. She reluctantly raised her hand. Several other women joined her. The infirmary was a clean and simple place. A young American medical sergeant greeted them, saying, "I'm Sergeant Davis. You can call me Doc." Claire's English was poor, but medical terms and universal gestures sufficed. Together they began organizing supplies for simple wound dressings and vitamin distribution. In the afternoon, during their free time, she and Annalise walked around the camp. Just outside the barbed wire, several American soldiers were playing baseball. A ball accidentally rolled towards the wire. The player, a young private, ran over and bent down to retrieve it. Clara and Annalise stepped back. The soldier looked at them as he picked up the ball and nodded with a shy smile. "Sorry, ladies." Annalise whispered in surprise. Did he call us ladies? That evening, Clara wrote her first letter from the camp. The letters would be censored, but she wanted to write anyway. "Dear Mom," she began. Don't worry about me. I'm safe. You'll find it hard to believe what I'm about to say, but they're treating us well. I had coffee today. Real coffee. They chose me to work in the infirmary here because I treated a wounded soldier. An American doctor addressed me as Miss Huber. That was the strangest thing I've heard around here. We're still at war, aren't we? Or have we stopped fighting and nobody told Germany? I don't understand. When she finished her letter, a sunset was bathing the camp in a golden light outside. Captain Miller was looking out of his office window. The scene he saw was not one of fearful enemies, but women chatting, laughing, and walking in small groups. Beginning to see them as human beings was a struggle for him too. But seeing Clara's focused demeanor in the infirmary, Annalisa's surprised smile at the American man's greeting, this was something beyond propaganda. On the first day at Camp Phoenix, hostility was slowly giving way to curiosity and professional respect. But the war was still raging, and news from the other side of Europe could share of its fragile peace. Clara and the others couldn't help but think about Germany's ultimate defeat, and how this human paradise would send them back to the harsh realities of the real world. 8 May 1945, the day. The news reached Camp Phoenix late at night, seeping in with the distant chimes of victory bells and the joyful shouts of soldiers in the guard tower. The news that Germany had surrendered unconditionally suddenly pierced the camp's silent night. Clara sat quietly in her barracks with Annalise. The sounds of celebrations outside could be heard. Annalise's eyes were filled with tears, but not from joy, from fear. "What will happen now?" she whispered. "We're no longer prisoners of war. Will they take us somewhere else to punish us? Will they send us to Germany? What awaits us there?" Clara couldn't say anything. She shared the same fear. This camp had been an unexpected refuge. The outside world, a ruined homeland. An angry, victorious army, starvation, now seemed much more threatening. The next morning, the atmosphere in the camp had completely changed. The euphoria of victory had given way to a heavy, uncertain anticipation. The American guards wore mixed expression. The pride of victory, the relief of a war ended, and the confusion of how to treat the women whose status as enemy was now uncertain. Captain Miller gathered the women in the parade ground. His face was serious. "You know that Germany has surrendered," he began, as the interpreter translated his words. "Your war is over. However, the situation in occupied Germany is unstable. You will remain at Camp Phoenix until safe transport and release procedures are arranged. Your status is no longer prisoner of war, but surrendered personnel." Its official announcement did not completely dispel the fear, but at least it provided some framework. Contrary to their expectations, no punishment came. The food remained the same quality. The work in the infirmary continued, and even the English lessons became more regular. This continuity provided a measure of reassurance. One afternoon, while Clara was counting supplies in the infirmary, Captain Miller entered. He held a small package marked Red Cross. "Miss Huber," he said, struggling to pronounce her name. "This is for you. From Germany." Clara's hands trembled as she took the package. Inside were a short, sad letter from her mother and a few blackened photographs. The letter said their hometown of Munich had been bombed, their house destroyed, but her family was alive. The photographs showed familiar streets reduced to piles of rubble. Tears rolled down her cheeks silently. Miller stood there, bearing witness to this enemy nurse's personal tragedy. This was not the abstract pain of an enemy, but concrete, human suffering. He was reminded once again that war claimed lives on both sides. "I'm sorry," he murmured, unable to find any other words. Clara wiped her tears and raised her head. "Thank you, Captain. This letter means a great deal to me." At that moment, the relationship between them changed once more. They were no longer just guard and prisoner, victor and vanquished. They were two human beings. One had learned that his home had been destroyed. The other was silently witnessing it. That night, Clara continued her letter. "Dear Mom, I received your letter. I am so grateful that you and Dad are alive. Our home is gone, but you are here. I saw the expression on the face of the American officer here, Captain Miller, when you gave me the letter. He seemed ashamed. Why? He didn't drop the bombs. He didn't start this war. Perhaps Just like us, he's merely a cog in this great machine. And sometimes when the cogs clash, we remember that we are human. Victory in Europe Day was met not with celebrations at Camp Phoenix, but with deep sorrow and uncertainty. The end of the war did not mean freedom. It brought a new kind of imprisonment, mourning the past and fearing an uncertain future. And in this fragile environment, the strained, silent understanding that had begun to blossom between Clara and Captain Miller was set to deepen in the days ahead. In the weeks following the E-Day, life at Camp Phoenix settled into a peculiar normality. With the war's end, military discipline had relaxed somewhat, and the camp had become like a self-sufficient little village. Now that they were no longer considered enemies, interactions between the American guards and the prisoners took on a more natural tone. Captain Miller ordered that the unused land behind the camp be allocated to the women. Work keeps the mind occupied, he reasoned, and perhaps growing their own vegetables gives them a sense of control. This idea was met with enthusiasm among the German women. Clara, Annalisa, and 8 others, equipped with spades and rakes, set about working the barren soil. This was not merely an activity. It was about building, nurturing, and bringing life back, unlike their devastated homeland. With muddy hands and sweat on their brows, quietly working the soil, they clung to a sense of purpose for the first time in months. One Saturday afternoon, something unexpected happened. A few young American soldiers came to the edge of the barbed wire and began watching them. One of them, Sergeant Davis, plucked up his courage and approached. "Looks good," he said, pointing to the garden, and then making a planting gesture with his hand. Annalisa smiled hesitantly. "Danke, thank you." This small interaction opened a door. The next day, the same soldiers returned with a few extra spades and a bucket of potato seedlings. Using sign language and a mixture of broken German and English words, they began to work together. What had initially been a shy, informal contact gradually became natural. While the soldiers tackled the heavy work, the women focused on the more delicate planting tasks. Laughter and joking about mistakes could be heard. One afternoon, Clara noticed Captain Miller watching them from his office window. Their eyes met. Miller looked away at first, then looked back and nodded slightly. Clara responded in kind. It was less an approving greeting and more acceptance of a shared understanding of this strange partnership. The garden became more than a physical project. It was a shared space where both sides shared their language, culture, and humanity. A soldier shared a packet of chewing gum he had taken from his pocket. In return, a German woman tried to explain a cake recipe left by her mother in broken English. This was concrete proof that bridges destroyed by war could be rebuilt, even in the shadow of barbed wire. That night, Clara wrote in her diary, "Today, in the mud, I planted tomato seedlings with an American sergeant. His name is Jim. He told me about his family's farm in Kansas. I told him about my grandmother's pots on her balcony in Munich. We didn't talk about politics. No war crimes or bombings. We just talked about soil and growing things. Perhaps peace comes not through grand agreements, but through small shared moments like this, with dirty hands and a common goal. What we planted in this garden is much more than just vegetables." When the August 1945 heat descended on Camp Phoenix, the garden had begun to bud. But there was something heavier in the air than the fertile scent of the soil. The reality of returning home. The news that the first groups would be repatriated to Germany hit the camp like a hurricane. Captain Miller brought the news. Standing before the women gathered in the parade ground, his face was more grim than usual. "The first repatriation convoy will depart next week," he announced, the interpreter's voice ringing with an unfamiliar tone. "You will be sent to transfer points between camps, and from there to your destinations in Germany." The words were clear, but the silence that followed was complex and heavy. There were no cries of victory or tears of relief, only a deep, gnawing uncertainty. Annalisa, next to Clara, whispered, her face drained of color, "Bo, there?" The word "there" described a land they had once called home, now filled with ruins, deprivation, and probably guilt. That evening at dinner, there were the first carrots and peas gathered from the garden. But the dining hall was filled not with the silence of victory, but of farewell. The women realized that this camp which they had feared just a few months ago, now seemed like paradise compared to their devastated homeland. Here there was clean water, warm beds, and most importantly, safety. The next day, while Clara was doing the final stock count in the infirmary, Captain Miller appeared at the door. "Miss Huber," he began, his voice unusually soft. "Are you ready?" Clara turned, setting down the box of bandages she was holding. "What do I need to be? What did you decide us to be? Mentally? Physically? To be ready to go to a country ravaged by war, not even knowing if my family is still alive?" Miller couldn't answer for a moment. Instead, he took a small wrapped object from his pocket. It was a packet of seeds. "For the garden," he said. "American tomatoes. Perhaps you can grow them there too." This small symbolic gift brought tears to Clara's eyes. This was not something a guard gave to a prisoner, but a sign of hope from one human being to another. "Thank you," she murmured. "But Captain, what will happen here after we leave? This, she gestured around her. Will you forget it?" Miller looked away. "It won't be easy to forget," he admitted. "The war is over, but what happened here, this was different." When the moment of farewell arrived, the emotions were complex. There were tears for the women boarding the trucks. But now it was not out of fear, but the sadness of leaving a refuge. Some American guards approached to give a final salute, even to wave goodbye. Corporal Davis handed Annalise a small chocolate bar. "Good luck," he said briefly. Clara turned to Miller before boarding the truck. She did not salute, for she was no longer a guard nor a prisoner. She merely bowed her head slightly. "Perhaps one day, Captain," she said. "Our tomatoes will grow in the same sun." Miller stood there, motionless, until the trucks had left the camp gates and disappeared into the distance. Behind him lay a garden, its shoots still green, an empty, silent barracks. He had won the victory, but the only thing he could feel in that moment was a strange and unexpected sense of loss. The return to Germany was chaotic and brutal. Unlike the orderly life at Camp Phoenix, Clara arrived in Munich reduced to ruins after a long journey by train and lorry. The piles of rubble rising in the city center made the clean barracks of Camp Phoenix feel like a distant dream. She managed to reach her family. They were living in a relative's basement, their faces marked by hunger and loss. But Clara was different from many other returning prisoners. In her rucksack, there was perhaps nothing but the tomato seeds Captain Miller had given her. But in her mind, she carried a much more valuable treasure: a regained faith in humanity and a practical hope. Among the ruins where her family lived, her first task was to establish a small vegetable garden. Using the techniques she had learned at Camp Phoenix, she cleared a suitable patch of soil from among the rubble and removed the stones. Her neighbors watched her with suspicion at first. Being an American prisoner was still a stigma. But Clara began to use her infirmary experience to help sick and injured neighbors. She used the medicinal herbs she grew in her garden to make simple medicines and taught clean dressing techniques. One day, an elderly woman, the wife of a former Nazi party member and ostracized by society, fell ill. No one was willing to help her. Despite her mother's warnings to stay away from them, Clara took her first aid kit and visited the woman. While treating her, she hummed a simple English song she had taught Corporal Davis at Camp Phoenix. The old woman was overcome with tears. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Clara's answer was simple: "Because I can." This small but meaningful act began to break the ice in the neighborhood. Clara was applying what she had learned at Camp Phoenix here, meeting on common ground as human beings, beyond hostilities. Another turning point came with the arrival of American occupation forces in the area. One day, an American soldier was on duty at a food distribution point. When Clara joined the queue, the soldier noticed her old uniform and took on a stern expression. Clara calmly asked in her broken English, "I am Clara Huber, a nurse from Camp Phoenix. Do you know Captain Miller?" The soldier's expression changed. "Miller? The camp in Arkansas?" He smiled. "We heard the reports from there. You're one of the girls from Garden Camp." Garden Camp. That was Camp Phoenix's new name. The soldier added an extra tin and a piece of chocolate to Clara's parcel. I was in the same unit as one of Miller's men, he explained. They told me what happened there. You're different. This brief encounter completely changed Clara's standing in her neighborhood. She was no longer just an ex-prisoner, but someone respected by the Americans. Soon, she became a bridge between the occupation administration and the neighborhood residents. As her English improved, she began translating for aid organizations and advising debris removal teams. Clara decided to write a letter. Using the best paper she could find, she carefully wrote in English. Dear Captain Miller, I hope this letter reaches you. I am in Munich and my family is safe. Your seeds have sprouted in this soil. But it's not just tomatoes. I'm trying to grow something new here. A belief that people can see humanity, even in those they once saw as enemies. I haven't forgotten the lesson we learned at Camp Phoenix. And now, here among the ruins, I'm trying to teach the same lesson. Thank you simply for acting humanely. Yours sincerely, Clara Huber. Weeks after posting the letter, a small parcel arrived. Inside were more seeds, a few pens, and a short note from Captain Miller. Mrs. Huber, it's lovely to hear your garden is growing. The garden here is now empty, but our knowledge is not. Please keep growing. Yours sincerely, J. Miller. Holding the package, Clara realized once again that Camp Phoenix was not just a prisoner of war camp. There, a sanctuary of humanity had been built that the war could not destroy. And now, the light she'd had taken from that sanctuary was kindling a small torch of hope in a dark land. Perhaps the true victory was not won on the battlefields, but in such small gardens, in the heights of people.